questions as well. First question I have for you, Judith, what prompted you to take this on and become a playwright and write about this experience, given everything that was going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so when I was first diagnosed, I was in a lot of shock. I think I think we're all in shock with devastating news. We just handle it differently. And I had the last job I was working at was at a pain management clinic where people whose lives are devastated by pain. And I see myself as somebody who's really empathetic and a really good practitioner. And I realized that we worked in a way where we would sort of, at team meetings, even sometimes out loud say, "There, but for the grace of God go I." And now I was on the other side of that. And so I felt like that awareness that I had of being both a provider and a patient, I got to see things. And I wanted that to share that information so that we could all be better medical providers and healers. And also, I started looking around to see what was available to sort of support me, what was out there, because I was having the first oncologist I went to speak with, I thought that my voice, I think I sounded like I was 5 years old. I had lost my sense of
Hmm.
self, any sense of all the years of maturity and professionalism was gone. That's what happens with vulnerability. And I was looking in media and books, and really I saw was the cancer warrior. And I
Mhm.
wasn't feeling like a warrior. And I began to explore that, ended up in this class by just happenstance and destiny, and had never done anything like this before, but really driven by realizing that there was so much of what I was going through, and that I wanted people to have something that they could see, that any response to devastating news is a worthwhile response to have. It's yours and to hold. And I wanted that for both the patients, caregivers, and for people who work with
Hmm.
people who
I
have.
I have a lot of questions for Chaya too, but I want to ask you a question about that. You said cancer warrior. There were so many, I thought, profound observations and themes you touched on in this piece. Things like the cancer warrior, the good patient. Oh, you have a good attitude. Um, for you, coming from it from the professional side, we all share in that, I think. And then having the patient side, you have a different perspective on that. Tell me a little bit about that. Talk to me a little bit more about those type of terms and what terms you use for cancer patients or for people who are facing life-threatening illness, and how you relate to those terms, cancer warrior, have a good attitude. Some of that came through in the play, but I'm curious to hear why you chose those things to talk about.
Um, well, I think I'd like Hyatt to actually talk a little bit to the word caregiver,
Sure.
because that was really kind of a big light that we came upon together.
Can you guys still see us?
Yes.
Okay, we can't see ourselves. Um, I was just really taken aback by the word caregiver and patient. And immediately we were put into roles. So immediately we were supposed to separate. It felt like we have this mutual relationship. And instead of being supported in our family unit and as a family, we were separated.
Hmm.
And I didn't relate to the concept of caregiver at all, because that's not what we do with each other. I mean, we care for each other, both of us. So I've never, even during the transplant, I didn't really relate to that term. And I found it to be actually not helpful and not supportive to us both in the process. So I always speak out about that. And most people I know find it helpful to hear me talk about that because they feel similarly.
That's it. That's interesting. We say at Cancer Support Community, when one person in the family is diagnosed with cancer, everybody's diagnosed with cancer. And you also, a little bit about your background, you also came from the healthcare profession as well. You're a chaplain working in healthcare, right? So you
Right.
came in with a very, yeah, so talk about that maybe a little bit.
Yeah, and I was doing palliative care chaplaincy after doing regular chaplaincy for some time. And so, you know, while Judith was going through her hard stuff, I was supporting people in the hospital and taking my experience and applying it to the work and learning in the workplace. I was pretty immersed in it, but I learned a great deal and worked with a great team.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of positive things to say about palliative care, which is usually a team approach to working with people who are facing difficult challenges, serious life-limiting illnesses, and their families.
Right, right. Let me take a little break to ask a question, and I encourage people to put other questions in there. This is from Craig. He says, if you have faced this, how do you respond to people who say you don't look sick, and B, the cure is already out there locked in a closet because Big Pharma hasn't figured out how to monetize it? Boy, that's a great question. How do you respond to that? Thank you, Craig.
Oh, that is great. So first, I forgot, I really want to thank your organization for bringing my show to more people. I think it's, I'm proud of it, and I think it's an important message. So thank you. Yeah, even in this pandemic, sometimes when I get on a Zoom call, people, wow, you look great. Chaya and I are on a call, and I think, Chaya, do they expect me to look worse because I have cancer, or I'm on treatment, or something like that? But that's something most people get with cancer, because there's just that feeling that you should have something on the outside, and not respecting treatments are different for people. So what's going on the inside is always different. And I have always learned that it's very helpful in any hard situation to better to say, you know, how are you today? You know, or today you look good. It's
Mhm.
nice to see that you're smiling when we're talking together, versus, wow, you look good, you know, like denying what is going on in the reality of a person. And the pharma, Big Pharma, yeah. So I sort of allude to my sometimes being a provider and knowing too much can work against you. So the reason I'm here, literally alive here with you at this point, 6 years out, is because of Big Pharma, and I wouldn't be without them. My plasma cells were going crazy, and so there's that balance. I don't believe there's a cure. There's a woman named Kathy Gusfield who started MMRF, Multiple Myeloma
Yes,
Research Foundation.
great organization. Yep.
She started a medical model that was new in this country as a Harvard business. And I actually say I owe my life to her. She's getting people to work together and helping people understand that making money and making health don't have to be in opposition to each other. So that, I forgot his name, but you should actually look up some talks with Kathy Gusfield at MMRF. I think that would help you think about Big Pharma.
Yeah, she transformed the research for multiple myeloma in a very short time. A remarkable story. Yeah. You
And now
know,
that's
yes.
being used for all other cancers
Yep.
around the world. So yeah.
I'm curious. So when the tape we saw was from March 2019, right? So really nothing's happened since then in the world, right? So there's not a lot going on right now. I'm curious though, personally for you, if you can update us a little, and then also obviously in the context of everything that's going on, it adds a whole nother layer, but give us a little update of what's happened since that was filmed.
So that was filmed a year before the pandemic. And actually I had a run at the Berkeley Marsh. My big run was during the beginning of the pandemic. I did one show, and then I canceled probably 48 hours early before we went into shelter in place. And my director, my brilliant director, Rebecca Fisher, has been texting me during the show, because we haven't watched the show together, and just talking about, you know, so much of what I was already separated from people, being careful about my immune system, having experience of wearing a mask and trying to speak through it, washing everything. So much of what I've gone through, people have now experienced. And so on some levels, there wasn't that much of a change. And I know so many people in the disability community have felt like, oh, now people know what it's like. I can't get to a meeting and now I'm in the room. And
Mhm.
so in some ways that has been phenomenal. And in those ways, I think people really understand more about infections and hugging. It's been a real issue in our family and our friends about hugging in those before the pandemic for the first
Mhm.
5 years. So now we don't even get a chance to get close to hug.
Right.
So it'll be, I know Chaya and I have talked about like what'll happen on the other side. Right now, my cancer markers are heading back up into the danger range. So sometime in the future, I'll be back on what I consider very active chemo
Mhm.
with more challenging side effects. So that is a very hard place to sit
Yes.
during COVID, and thinking about being in infusion rooms for hours during COVID and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And did you want to say?
Well, I mean, you have been we both have had to be extremely careful. I mean, a lot of people are, but a lot of people, are still going to grocery stores and doing things like just carefully. And we're like being uber careful. Like we're
Mhm.
not doing hardly anything that has contact with others. So because of your immune system.
I was struck, you said something, I was struck, I ever had to say, when I watched it, my first thought was, wow, you're really brave. And you say something in the play that stuck with me. You say, I look tough, but I'm not. And I'm curious if your understanding of what tough means or your feelings about that word tough have changed going through this cancer experience and the stem cell transplant.
Hmm. My reflexive action was to answer that question about bravery,
Uh-huh.
because so many people think that we're all brave, and that goes along with the warrior piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll just sort of go there and then try to diverge a little bit into your comment, which is people just put one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that for various reasons. There's definitely an inner desire to stay alive, and people do it in different ways. And sometimes the show changes. And sometimes I say, oh, being brave will be if and when I decide not to continue with treatment, since I have a cancer that I could continue, theoretically being in the Bay Area, I could do all kinds of clinical trials if I choose to, and I'll have those decisions to make. And in terms of that word of, what's the word again?
Tough.
Tough.
I look tough, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I think that just tied more into the feelings of shame that I had. So much like thinking I should have been able to mobilize myself better. I'm someone who cries and gets through something out, and then once the tears are done, I'm actually feeling better. But tears are scary to a lot of people, and they're helpful for me. So it's a funny word, huh?
It's a funny word.
Like I'm going to toughen up. Like that's not something that either of us talk about. We got to toughen up and just get through it. I mean, a lot of people, that's how it works. And that's not Judith.
Well, I love the people at my support groups and conferences that I've performed at. They often have a military background. They say, go big or go home. That's a military comment. And I have to say, I love that comment. I get it. It's not me.
Right.
That's the point of the show. I love you. I love that that's who you are. That is not me. And also a lot of people, especially older people, they'll just do whatever the doctors say without questioning. And there's so much about class, race, and age in response to doctors. And knowing that doctors, especially with multiple myeloma, they do not know what to do exactly. They are out there making guesses, scientific, substantiated guesses. So, yeah.
That's great. Anything I was going to ask you too, Rabbi Chaya, from your perspective? I don't know. I don't want to call you the caregiver now. I can't think of another word though. So I'll just say from your perspective.
Family member.
Family member. That's great. That is great. Thank you so much. So as the family member, you answered this a little, but I thought, from your perspective of being tough and being brave, and what does that look like for you?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. No one has ever asked me that before. Like they've never taken my blood pressure. Anyway,
I love that, by the way. I love
yeah,
that.
and it's true. It's really true. Bravery for me. Yeah, I think at the beginning it was really hard for both of us. We were like surprised at how much in shock we were for so long because we've both been around so much suffering in our work and in our lives. So I think we were kind of surprised that it was such a big shock. And so I don't think we had any bravery going on during that period of time.
Hmm.
It wasn't even a word we could relate to. So I don't think about bravery as much as coping and how to stay creative and how to stay alive and how to stay present in the moment, how to make what we're going through mean something, and also have it not be the only thing that we're talking about day and night, and
Right.
after 6 years and the transplant 4 years ago, I think we're living kind of a normal life now, waiting for when the next shoe is going to drop, because that will happen. There's no doubt that that's going to happen. We just hope for as long as possible. And, we don't know what will happen at that point. There's new treatments for sure all the time. But yeah, I think for me, it's a question of how do I stay creative? How do I stay focused on my own growth and not completely focused on, the M&M, the multiple myeloma. Anytime someone says multiple, I'm like, I kind of have that, but they're like, oh, multiple something else. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
It's what made me think, what it reminded me of was the 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. When you're in it, you don't have the perspective, right? You haven't finished it. So you're just, okay, all I have to do today is take 2 steps and maybe I'll go 2 steps forward. That's what you're focusing on, maybe more than being brave. But when story's told in this way, usually don't get to hear the whole story. It gives it a different perspective, I think. I'll ask you a question here. Somebody says, if you have to name one thing besides being brave, we're back to brave, what inspires you most during the most difficult time of your therapy? Boy, that's glad you're thinking about that one, I can see.
Early into the transplant, when my body was doing things and there was no turning back, and every part of my body was going haywire, I called Chaya because she, of course, had a cold and was home and couldn't be with me. And I just was lost. And she just said, you only have one thing to do, which is keep your eyes on the prize. And that's that little, sort of AA kind of, for today, just for this step. And I also, after every infusion, I would walk from Kaiser up to this cemetery, to the top of this hill and back down. And I just made that my meditation or my agreement or my way to cement the treatment in my mind. So making up things that work for you. Not everybody meditates. I do Feldenkrais. That's what works for me. And if you have whatever way that you can stay connected to your own strengths or intuition, it shouldn't look like anyone else's. You don't need to be in.
No, you can finish your sentence.
I know. Yeah, it shouldn't look like anyone else's. It should look like yours, and it will come just like learning comes. It's that spontaneous freedom of feeling and movement that really, I think, keeps people alive in challenging times.
I think for you, it was being so involved in writing this play, because first of all, you only did the first half. You wrote the first half before the transplant, and then you wrote the second half. So Judith has been working on this for quite a long time, and it was like really, really grounding for you, very creative, very exciting, and it gave you purpose. And at the same time, I started writing. And I wrote articles about how doctors could give bad news better, and they got published. And I got, so I got to and I started a blog, which I had never done before, because I needed a place to like have my voice as well. So I think creative expression, whatever your creative expression is extremely helpful. Oh, it can be.
Well, that is a perfect segue to the next question from Kathy, actually. I was wondering if you could have even seen the question. It says, Judith, you use a lot of humor in your play and are creative. You write and perform. Did you write and act in a previous career? Has your humor and performing helped you deal with your cancer?
Great question. No, I had not written a solo performance or written a play or really acted before. I was a clown on the streets of New York City when I was like 17. David Ford, who is the phenomenal solo performance teacher from the Marsh, he taught me that if you want to tell a story and bring people along, especially in something that involves topics that people don't usually want to talk about, you have to bring them along. And it's true for anybody at any storytelling. You have to bring them in a way that they can feel taken care of. You have to balance things out. And so the humor was part of the balance. And the other thing, which kind of goes back to the very first guy's question, I think it was Ken, about pharma.
Craig.
Yep. I had a lot of anger in my original writing of the play. So the transplant, anger about this, anger about the cake. And I realized that when you're performing, anger hits with it just hits and drops. And so humor and implying things and letting the person around you take that story and make with it what they need to is really a best way to communicate. So it's just a good overall idea.
Are you working on something else now?
I am. I just started working with David. I'm going to work with David Ford. I'm going to do a legacy of my life. So I think it will be nice to leave that for my friends and family.
Wow.
I can't wait. I have no idea what she's going to do.
And how much do the both of you collaborate? Do you share it or with Chaya or Rabbi Chaya, or how does that, because you are a team going through the cancer, how does that work with the writing process?
So I usually write at the ocean and I scream and yell at the ocean. The ocean is my first collaborative. It's because it's loud, it's like an audience. So it's alive. So when you're a performer, if you don't have a live audience, there's a certain level you can only get to with talking to yourself. Chaya also was, she didn't volunteer, but she was my lighting and sound and tech person. And when we were a 2-person show before I became more famous. So she got pulled in early. It was not her favorite job.
But I also saw you would run drafts by me quite a bit. Yeah.
She's seen, and she's been to every performance and held my hand. And we often, I mean, first of all, since Chaya's been a rabbi, I mean, I help her with every Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah drash, everything every sermon I hear before. Sometimes I'm like, can I just hear it that day? No. So we've supported each other and we have good support styles like that. But this was really new. There was a lot of learning, a lot of skills. And I of course, I'm a natural at some level of performing, and that goes with my personality. So that helped me. And I'm also really hoping to do more of these kind of virtual performances. In particular, Chaya and I we did a showing of this and then a discussion with a group of folks at UCSF that were training to be in palliative care.
Wow.
And that discussion went on for almost an hour and a half. And they asked, it was about 50-50, and how our relationship together through this and what we could offer to that community was phenomenal. So we're hoping to do more medical community, nursing school, things like that.
We have this has been fantastic. We have about 3 minutes left. I wanted to wrap up, speaking of live audience, we have over 58 people on right now. We can't see them, they can see us. I know that a lot of the people who are listening are cancer patients themselves or family members. What would you tell them about writing? What do you have any words of advice, both of you, about this experience and what it did for you, other than obviously performing. That's a benefit for us. But what do you think it did for you, even if you never performed it?
Well, actually, there's a woman who does I forgot her
A
name.
writing workshop at the Cancer Support Committee. I forgot her name, Anne, maybe? Anyway, that was really a wonderful group. But what I was going to say is that when I was so angry about so many things in the first year and a half, I did a lot of writing, but then I didn't do anything with it for a while. It was really important to get it out, look at it, but not try to get it out in the world until I could look at it a little bit more objectively. So for me, the writing process was very therapeutic, and sharing it with people was therapeutic, but not really launching it out until I had a little bit of space.
Right.
And the writing class we did at CSC, I learned about prompts. And for me, even sharing it with one person is satisfying. It doesn't really need to be more than that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I want to let you know that, I don't know if you can see the chat, but Andy has been great about putting Rabbi Chaya's website there, and the link for the film to watch that again, and also Judith's email address, and also Cancer Support Community's website. So we're just coming up on 6:30 now, and I want to thank you. First, I want to thank you so much for writing this and sharing it with all of us. And I want to thank you for being so open, the both of you, tonight, to take these questions and share with our audience. And we're going to do this in person very soon. I really want to do this in person one day, where we can show it and have a live audience. So that's what I'm hoping for.
And I want to make a shout out. I see some Beth Chaim people here, so I want to say hi. I just noticed it in the chat. So
oh, great.
Appreciate them coming up. That was wonderful.
That's fantastic. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for coming. Have a fantastic evening. Feel free to email us, contact us for any feedback. And once again, Judith and Rabbi Chaya, we so appreciate your sharing with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
That's right.